Okay, this really wasn't a question as much as it was sharing the perspective of Justin Driver, and because you shared this with me, and I know that I've sat on it for a while, but that's because I wanted to look into a little bit more about Justin Driver, and then this book, The Schoolhouse Gate. Law professor, he was a law clerk, intelligent guy, and I listened to. Well, I'm going to include it in this response, but I listened to his full speech at the Clinton School of Public Service there in Arkansas. About the various conundrums we have currently in public education with regards to the First Amendment, the Fourth Amendment, and the Eighth Amendment. And the Eighth Amendment deals with cruel and unusual punishments. That's a constitutional, or that's a Bill of Rights. We should all be free from any kind of cruel and unusual punishment at the hands of anyone, but especially at the hands of government, which is what the Bill of Rights really applies to, is what the government should not be doing to you, because these rights, as humans, we were all born with. Nothing that government can give us or take away. And I think that so many of us have forgotten, or maybe we're ignorant of it, because our education system hasn't done a very good job in the realm of civics and really teaching that we have natural rights as humans. And this was a concept really that is unique to the United States, that has since been adopted across mainly Europe and other select places across the world. But the United States was really the first one to take these ideas and the philosophical beliefs and have them coalesce into these ideas that included that people are free and that they were born that way. Now, what I always find interesting about humans is that, you sit there and insert these conflicts, these, I'm going to use the word again, these conundrums into, let's say the Constitution or the Bill of Rights or the Declaration of Independence, that society at that time wasn't living, all right? Because at some point, you insert these things, these philosophical perplexities, and what it sets in motion is this great undoing of how civilization was doing things, or how society was acting before you inserted that. So, all men are created equal. Well, that was in our Declaration, right? Okay. But at the time, was that true in practice? No, it wasn't. And so it took, inserting that in there was so intelligent, because what it ended up doing is it forced society to change over time, and it evolved in its understanding of what the concept of human freedom was and equality. And we're still in that today. But look at how much progress we've made over the course of a few hundred years. And that is tremendous when you sit there and compare it with the expanse of human history. When freedom and individual liberty were not even in the thought process. Oh, people like to sit there and they like to only look at the negative in this country. And look at the negative in our founding documents. And I take the opposite approach. We are evolving in our concepts and our understandings of what liberty is. And just because we're not perfect in our application now, doesn't mean that we're not striving toward that. And we're trying to self-correct. And say what you will about the United States and this culture. It has always been on a path of self-correction. And our entire founding documents are there to protect the minority. Now, has it always been perfect doing that? Absolutely not, because humans are in charge. And it's not a racial thing, it's not an ethnic thing, it's not a religious thing, it's not anything. Other than the fact that majorities, no matter what they're composed of, will always, I'm not going to say oppress the minority, but they tend to overlook, they tend to ignore the minority opinion and the minority viewpoint and the minority participation. That's part of the reason I do what I do. And in this country, the individual is the smallest minority. The individual is liberty. And we start there. If we recognize the individual value of a human, and that they're born free and they're born with natural rights, and they're born free of cruel and unusual punishment by other people, then you see how you can expand that out from the individual to then the group. And then it gets to our special needs and our disability community. But it starts with the individual. And I'm one of these people that I agree with Justin Driver. Now, it's interesting that in his talk he said that that he was eliciting the supports of liberals and libertarians. Well, I tend to be more on the libertarian mindset. All right, so I totally agree with him. But he left out conservatives because, from his perspective, conservatives tend to be bent more toward a heavy-handed government. And whereas I think that that people who believe in their particular brand of government authority are going to be bent that way, regardless if they identify as progressive, liberal, conservative. Who cares? I think government in the hands of whoever is always going to be prone to doing whatever that particular group wants done. So I have the opinion that it doesn't matter where you fall on the political spectrum, that's going to be your bent. You get enough people together, there's oppression. So that's why we have a Bill of Rights, and that's why we have the court system. And that's why we have a division of our branches of government between executive, legislative, and judicial. It's the entire reason we have a tiered system of government between federal, state, local, and whatever isn't specified in our documents. All the rest of those rights then fall to the people and the individual. And everything is supposed to be founded in the one concept of personal responsibility. And we don't have that. So, taking this back to the Schoolhouse Gate, I am absolutely getting this book, and I am absolutely reading it. And thank you so much, Erica, for sharing this with me. To put this on my radar. I should have known about this. I agree with what he's saying. And what's going to be interesting to me is that idea of oral persuasion as opposed to brute punishment. And that's going to sort of help me, because I see it. We see it all the time. It's just part of how our schools operate. And it is so interesting, depending on the community that you're in, depending on the demographics, depending on the because every community has its own little things that it does. But to call, but this is where we all need to circle back and decide whether or not we need refresher courses individually for ourselves as parents, or if you're not a parent yet, just as a citizen. If you're a grandparent, it doesn't matter who you are. Do you need a refresher course on your Bill of Rights and what they mean? Because just like what Justin Driver said, I completely agree that our courts have gotten it wrong in many, many instances. And they are a piece of where we currently sit. They are a piece and they are going to have to take responsibility. I mean, you sit there and you go, wow, but the Supreme Court. No, the Supreme Court is made up and composed of people that serve on a lifetime on a bench, and I don't know if I agree with a lifetime appointment to the Supreme Court or any of the courts, quite frankly. I just don't know how that fits into our republic model that we have to have, a lifetime appointment to where you can really screw things up if you're a bad apple. But, I mean, for example, Plessy versus Ferguson, the Dred Scott decision. I mean, those were all Supreme Court decisions. What's the one that I hate currently that's, allowed all of our corporations to sit there and control and manipulate our entire electoral process because, they were deemed to have rights equal to people, with regards to advocating for, candidates. That's insane. But Supreme Court made that decision. And then somebody later on is going to undo that. But to sit there and have this holy reverence toward the Supreme Court and their decisions, unfortunately, that's been sort of embedded into our mindset, depending on where you fall politically. Because some people view the Supreme Court as the protector of certain liberties and rights, and you shouldn't view them. They're just people making stupid, idiotic decisions. And sometimes they get them right. Sometimes they do. But the last thing I would ever do is hitch my little wagon to anything that comes out of there. All right? That's all depending on the argument that the attorneys make, quite frankly. And then a justice's ability to sit there and separate themselves from precedent, to create new precedent. I mean, it's if you could only see behind the curtain, guys, it's just not as intelligent as you think it is. But the Eighth Amendment, as Justin points out, is so under considered when it comes to schools. But yet, I believe that this absolutely is an important thing to consider with how our kids are treated with IEPs, and with regards to seclusion and restraint and these kind of things, the corporal punishment. There are so many things that they're doing inside of our public school that have been banned inside of our prison systems because it was already deemed cruel and unusual. But yet we're doing to our kids. We need refreshers, all of us that are advocating and all of us that are parents, in our Bill of Rights and our understanding in those areas, equipping ourselves with knowledge that enables us to take action, to change laws, and to change policy, and to change hearts, and to change our society and self-correct.